You're listening to DruidCast, episode 171.
Smile in your sleep. Midwinter day is here again, when we say goodbye to the shortest day. Now the first stirrings of spring, as the flickers of new life begin. Our star has now come, the wheel is turning. The Lady of Spring is here returning. Belting the first dawn of May, as the fires burn, we salute the sun. Light it a little, light it a little, light, 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 light. Light it a little, light it a little, light, 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 light. Midsummer time is here again, when we celebrate the longest day. Now is time of the harvest. Fruits have sprung, let's gather together. Thank Mother Earth for the gifts given. Autumn has crept upon us now. Death time is here, it's winter's bite. The veils are thin, the darkness has fallen. Light it a little, light it a little, light, 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 light. Light it a little, light it a little, light, 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 light. Light it a little, light it a little, light, 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 light. Light it a little, light it a little, light, 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 light. Midwinter's day is here again.
Hello my friends and welcome to DruidCast episode 171. I am your host Dave the Bard, and DruidCast is brought to you on or around the 20th of every month by the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. If you'd like to find out more about membership to the Order and our courses, you can do that on our website at druidry.org. Well, here we are again, your monthly dose of Druidic delight supplied via your preferred podcast player into your awaiting lugholes, and we have I've got a great show for you this month. Opening your show, you heard two fabulous songs. The first was Hush Hush, Time to Be Sleeping, that classic Scottish song performed by Ruby Moon and taken from their new album Selenity. And after that, you heard a song of the Wheel of the Year called Midwinter Day by Radethel Wynne from their self-titled new album. And don't forget, you can find links to all of the artists featured on DruidCast in the show notes. So, on with the show. Walking the Talk has a month off as the talky bit returns next with a discussion between Philip Carr-Gomm and the Archdruid of the Ancient Order of Druids in America, Donna O'Driscoll, discussing her new book, Sacred Actions. I'll see you afterwards. Enjoy.
The Talky Bit.
So, hello everybody. Here I am with Donna Driscoll. She's in, where are you, Donna, in the States? Whereabouts?
I'm in Western Pennsylvania in the Laurel Highlands region.
Oh, how lovely. So in the Highlands of Western Pennsylvania, and I'm in the lowlands of Sussex. And the reason why Donna is here is because she has just published a book called Sacred Actions, which she's going to hold up. Hold it up. Let's see it.
It is.
Sacred Actions. That's fantastic. And it's a fantastic book. And it's called, and the subtitle is Living the Wheel of the Year Through Earth-Centered Sustainable Practices. And that's why I wanted to talk with Donna, because, you know, the eightfold Wheel of the Year is this beloved scheme of Druids and pagans. And increasingly, the general public. Stephanie and I bought a book on coastal walking around Britain, big, mainstream book. And there are suggestions for each of the 8 festival times in the year, so it's becoming mainstream. But we as Druids love it because it's such a sophisticated system and it's so filled with meaning and connections, and you can build your spiritual practice around it. And the other thing that Druids love and are concerned about are nature and the state of the world, the state of the planet, and how we need to be sustainable and we need to take action and we need to be sacred activists. And what Donna's done is she's brought these 2 topics together, which is just incredible. And so that's why I wanted to talk to her and why I wanted everybody to share in our conversation. So first of all, let me introduce Donna, because it's not fair. She's sitting there and I haven't even introduced her. And Donna is the Grand Archdruid of the Ancient Order of Druids in America. And as such, I think it's fantastic because you took over from Gordon Cooper, wasn't it?
Yes.
About 3 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah.
Two years ago. And then last year, of course, OBOD, the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, had a new chief, and I handed over to Emma Burke in Ireland. And a while back, of course, Emma Restall Orr was very prominent in the Druid world, and she was a kind of co-chief with Philip Shallgrass of the British Druid Order. Alan Everett Hopman has been leading I think it's the Order of the White Oak. And so it's wonderful to see women in these leadership positions. So that's great. And I first met Donna at one of the OBOD East Coast gatherings, about probably, 5 or 6 years ago. And it
was the 2012 or 2013.
2012, gosh,
yeah,
yes, almost.
It's been a while.
Yeah. And she had published her tarot, the Tarot of Trees, which was great. And I seem to remember that you self-published it, and that got you through graduate school.
It did.
Yeah.
It's actually how I was able to join OBOD, because I was a poor graduate student and I self-published the Tarot of Trees, and suddenly I had the funds to be able to afford the Bardic course.
Oh, that's great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's great. And then you've also authored the Plant Spirit Oracle.
Yes, that's a new one.
Yeah, that's great. And Donna also was awarded the Mount Hemus Award on the 19th Mount Hemus lecture on in 20. Sorry, I was going to say in 2024, but I haven't traveled into the future. That's because it's going to be published in the book, Volume 3 of the Mount Hemus Lectures in 2024. But you can go online to druidry.org and see Donna's read Donna's Mount Hemus paper and download the PDF there, which is about the way in which the Eisteddfod tradition in Druidry has really changed and adapted, particularly with Obod and with other Druid groups perhaps as well. So that's a really interesting example of kind of living Druidry. And in fact, it occurs to me that it follows your theme of where you've taken this very contemporary issue of the environmental crisis and married it with, traditional concept like the eightfold year. And that's what you did in your Mount Hemus paper, I guess, is you took this traditional idea of the Eisteddfod and then you said, what are we doing with it in modern times? And really this very interesting way in which the empowerment has sort of switched from the hierarchy in the old days, where the Druid hierarchy would sort of judge people's artistic and creative contributions, and they still do in the Welsh National Eisteddfod. Where people submit songs and poetry and literature and so on, and then they're judged. Whereas the way it's worked in Obod is it's become more about process rather than the end result. That it's all about the enjoyment of it and the stimulation of our creativity. So, and now the project has your new book. Has it come out yet? Has it been published?
No, it's coming out on, I believe, May 22nd.
May 22nd, so that's next month. That's great. May the 22nd. And who's it published by?
It's through Red Feather, which is part of Schiffer Publishing.
Schiffer Red Feather. That's great. Fantastic. I wonder what it is about red, because, Weiser has red wheel and Schiffer's got red feather. It's obviously significant in some way. It signifies life and dynamism, I suppose.
The fire, right? The alchemical fire descending from the heavens, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So tell me, let's, maybe let's start off with a bit about you and why this theme really, why you wrote the book. Why did you write this book?
Well, I think I'll start with a little bit about me, and then I'll talk a little bit about how I wrote the book.
Yeah, sure.
So, it's interesting because when I look at my own history, and how I got into Druidry, it was really returning to nature. It was coming back. I had spent, the early part of my adult life, living a typical consumerist lifestyle. I went to school for a long time, played lots of video games, and, there's nothing wrong with that. But when I found Druidry at the age of 25, it sort of signaled to me a profound inner shift that I needed to make. But what became pretty obvious to me at that point was that it wasn't just enough to, go into the woods and have a spiritual experience. But I really needed to find a way of sort of aligning my outer life, which really wasn't very nature focused, with my inner life. And while I sort of naively thought, well, this isn't going to be too hard to do. And turns out, that's actually kind of a lifelong endeavor. And so, I started, I'm a lifelong learner. I really love learning. And I started studying different traditions that would help me do that. I took up homesteading and organic gardening, and all of the associated activities and practices with that. I studied permaculture. I received my permaculture design certification and my permaculture teacher certification,
Great.
which actually is woven into this book quite a bit. And I can talk a little bit about that. Started herbalism. I studied natural building. I'm now studying bushcraft and survivalism. And it's just these different ways of thinking about how do we apply human activities and human knowledge to a sacred interaction, and to really come to a place where we can live in a way within our lives that aligns with our spiritual practices and that aligns with the things that we try to do. And so to me, it was so important to be able to go find these things. But when I started digging into it, there was such a massive body of knowledge. One of the challenges we have, and I've been working in AODA as a volunteer and in leadership in AODA for about 6 or 7 years now. And for a long time, what I was doing is I was working with our new candidates as they were coming in. And one of the things we ask candidates to do is make 3 lifestyle changes to, as part of their Druid practice to align with the living earth. And it struck me that that was actually a pretty challenging thing for a lot of people. They wanted to do things like donate money to a cause. But what it really is about is saying, okay, or they wanted to do things like, I live in an apartment, I want to go live off grid. And we're like, okay, wait, let's just stop for a minute.
Completely unrealistic. Yeah.
Yeah, what can you do that you can sustain over time? And so I really came to this understanding over a period of about 10 years that it's not always about these big giant actions, but it's sort of about making small changes in our lives, incrementally over a long period of time that allows us to sort of shift into that sustainable regenerative living. And so that's really kind of where the whole idea for the book came in. And it really represents the sort of decades of learning and experience that I went through to sort of be able to do that for myself. And then I started sharing that on my blog, which is the Druid's Garden. And over time, lots and lots of people started responding. And I realized that there was probably a market for something like this that could introduce people to a range of practices and do it in the context of like sacred action and the Wheel of the Year.
That's great. That's great, isn't it? Because I guess, we all try to do things like recycle and so on, but to sort of set that within the context of our spirituality just makes it feel more meaningful and complete in some way. What are some of your favorite ideas that you share in the book?
There's so many different things. I mean, part of the way that I wrote the book is I wrote it so that if it doesn't matter where you live, it doesn't matter what your lifestyle is. So you could be in the city and, you can learn about worm composting and how that aligns with sacred practice. You can learn about growing small things, sprouting seeds, just, things like that. And so, I tried to write it in a way that there are pieces of this book that are accessible for every lifestyle, whether or not you're able-bodied or you have a disability, so it's trying to be really inclusive. I would say probably one of my very favorite things in the book is this concept. I actually first talked, John Michael and I kind of worked this out as we were having discussions, this idea of refugia. So, we have this ecological crisis. We know we're in the 6th great extinction. We have the age of the Anthropocene. And when you get into these big concepts, people get really shut down. You feel like, what can I possibly do? How can I possibly make a difference? And that really is a stifling thing for a lot of people, so it's really hard. You live in this catch-22. Here you are going into the trees, having these incredible sacred experiences as a Druid, as somebody practicing nature spirituality. And then you open up the internet and there's, another species that has gone extinct. And it's like this crushing despair. And so what I tried to do was find things that were really impactful. And so Refugia is one of those things. So this originally came out of this book called After the Ice Age, where this idea of refugia is that this is back in the time of the glaciers, all these ice ages where the glaciers essentially wiped life off of many parts of this planet. And what happened is that there were these small pockets of life that's actually how humans were sustained.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. And so we had these small pockets of life that survived for various reasons. And then that life was able to spread outward. So what if we take the idea of refugia and we apply it to a garden? So if I look outside my home, so we have a 5-acre homestead here in Western Pennsylvania. I am literally surrounded by a sea of monocropped corn and soy and wheat fields. That's essentially no real difference than a glacier, right? It's a monocrop.
It's a wasteland in somebody.
It's essentially a wasteland of life, right? There's not a place for bees or butterflies. But what if I take a small piece of my land and make it really intensely, biodiverse. Yeah, thank you. I was looking for that word.
Yeah.
Biodiverse. And I work especially to cultivate things that I know are endangered. So like we're doing that a lot here with rare woodland medicinal species on our land because, we have things like American ginseng, trillium, all of these plants that have been traditionally over harvested and that are no longer found in the Appalachian Mountains. We've got them here. And if we can cultivate a small place like that, we're actually making a difference because we're cultivating a place that then life can later spread, when we're past whatever this age is. So this idea of refugia could truly be a monumental thing. We could save all sorts of life if we can just create small pockets of life. And then suddenly you're doing something that's it's not just ecologically makes sense, but it's a spiritually rich place where you can connect and you can engage.
It's a fantastic idea, isn't it? It reminds me, of course, refugia is from the word refuge, and in the Dharmic traditions, I take my refuge in the Dharma, the Buddha, the Sangha, and so on, and it's used in Jainism as well. And this concept of taking refuge, it's lovely to bring. So it's not just in the classical way that you think about it, it's in terms of the self, the individual. I take my refuge in the teacher, the teaching, and the brotherhood, the community of followers and so on. But this brings it into the world, and it's part of, the work of an embodied spirituality that cares about the earth. And so that's lovely. And it's empowering too, because as you say, if you're surrounded, I mean, we're all surrounded by wastelands in all sorts of ways. And it can feel so easy to feel overpowered by it. But if you take this idea that you've just articulated, it's very beautiful, because it means even in a little garden, you can create this refuge that is full of teeming with life, just as within a sort of an intellectual wasteland or a spiritual wasteland, you can perhaps foster.
Can I take it one step further?
Sure,
So then let's say you create this refugia, right? And whether that's on your balcony, in your city garden, whether that is with a community of people in a public space, whether that's on your own property. So then you start growing things. You grow things maybe that are no longer abundant on your landscape, or maybe that are in need. So we have refugia here. And one of the things that we're growing a lot of is milkweed. Here in North America, milkweed sustains the monarch butterfly. And because of intensive farming practices and some of the new farming practices that have come out in the last 15 years, monarchs are in serious danger. So what do we do? So this is another technique in the book. So you gather those seeds, the monarch, so in this case, the milkweed seeds, maybe other seeds, New England aster, St. John's wort, other plants that used to be, that are native, that are really important to especially insects, which are one of the big areas that we're having a lot of trouble with here in North America. And then you take soil and you take clay and you mix them all together and you make these little magic seed balls.
Yeah. And
then you carry them with you in your crane bag. And when you go hiking and you see a good spot, then you toss them. And so suddenly then you're spreading, and you can, and part of the book, it's like, it's not just the physical action, but it's the magical work of empowering this with a blessing that then you can send out into the world. And suddenly now your little refugia, you're spreading seeds, you're spreading joy, and you really are making a difference. Some of the places I've thrown these things, you're driving down the side of the road. Oh, that's a good ditch. And so this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. It's this idea of thinking about, so I create this sacred garden. I do my spiritual practices in this place. I gather the seeds from the sacred garden. I give them to others. I create a blessing of these when I've made them in the fall. Maybe I do a ritual surrounding them, and then I spread that into the world. That's just such an empowering thing. It's directly in line with sacred activity, sacred practice, the wheel of the year. It's just, so those are the kinds of things that I've tried in many, many ways in this book to bring to bear and try to find some things that were less common, like what I'm describing. Everybody can recycle, and there's stuff about recycling in the book too, but these are ideas
that are common ideas. Yeah.
I try to bring in a lot of less common ideas that would give, Druids and people practicing other nature-based spiritual practices some really cool and interesting things that would be fun to do and that would be empowering.
That's great. So who should read this book? Is this a book just for Druids?
Oh no! I kind of hope everybody will read this book. I'm sort of targeting. There's some really interesting crossovers. So on one hand, we have neo-pagans, Druids, anybody who has a spiritual, people who practice shamanism, anybody who has a spiritual practice that is in some ways rooted with nature. I think that most people who are practicing any kind of pagan path, my friends in witchcraft, all of those folks, heathenry, all of us are finding ways of connecting deeply with nature, and we're all facing that same problem we talked about earlier. So there's that group. But I also think that there would be a second group of people that maybe have come into it from places like permaculture design or herbalism that are looking for a sacred connection with nature. And so they might be familiar with the practices, but the book could give them that sacred connection. Right. And I got that idea because when I lived in Michigan, we had a really long-standing permaculture meetup that I helped create, and a couple of my friends and I started. And, we started getting like 40, 50 people coming to these meetups, learning how to start seeds, or, how to bake bread from home, or whatever, how to, build an earth oven. And what was really amazing is that sometimes if I was hosting, they would wander to the back of the property where our stone circle was, where our grove would meet. And this is just a homesteader. They'd never heard of nature spirituality. I'm like, hey, Dana, I noticed you have a stone circle in the back part of your property. Tell me about that. And so it's interesting how I really feel like there's a lot that the communities of Druidry and neo-paganism can learn from the people that are doing the organic gardening and homesteading and herbalism, and vice versa. So I'm hoping that this book creates a space for those communities to come together and recognize just how much we can share with each other and how much we can grow together.
That's fantastic. And how specifically Druidic is it? I mean, how does it relate to your Druid path? Is it something that you could say is essentially about nature spirituality, or is there a particularly Druid kind of aspect to it?
Sure. Well, there's obviously, the entire book is laid out in the structure of the Wheel of the Year. So, any Druid, there are very few Druids I know that don't at least practice the solstices and equinoxes, if not the fourfold wheel. And so, if you had an existing Druid practice and you were practicing each of these wheels, you could read this book over the course of a year. And there are rituals, and there are activities, and there are rituals, and there are practices for each of those. So it'd be very easy for a Druid to pick this up, or anyone who practiced the Wheel of the Year, really, and say, okay, I'd like to build in another aspect to my sustainable practice. What could I do? What rituals could I do? So in that way, it absolutely aligns. And I'm a Druid, so many of the experiences in there, I talk about Druidry. The other thing that I think is very aligning with Druidry is I actually draw upon the permaculture ethical system, which essentially has two parts. It's people care, fair share, and earth care. And
so say that again: people care,
fair share, and earth care. So it's the idea that if we care for people, we make sure their basic needs are met. And there's lots of people in the world who have professions that are people care. There are lots of people in the world whose professions are primarily earth care. And then, of course, we have this idea of fair share. So if we bring these together, they provide a really fantastic ethical system for saying to yourself, okay, how does this align with the three ethics? And of course, it's a triad, which is exciting. And so it really provides sort of a robust way of looking at existing Druid practice and thinking about, and because we don't have an inherent ethical system within Druidry. We have the idea of nature is good, and, there are things that we all agree. And certainly your book, What Do Druids Believe? You outline many of those in really nice detail. But I think that this gives us an additional level. It almost gives you like a rubric or a meditation that when you come into a situation, you can use. And so that has really enhanced my own Druid practice, and the Druids that I've shared this with. We've had a lot of conversations about this. So I think there's just so much stuff in there for anyone practicing nature spirituality, but certainly for Druids. And obviously I'm coming at this. I am a Druid. That is my life path. So I'm coming at it absolutely from that angle.
Yes, that's great. And kind of woven into it is this idea of sacred action, isn't it? That presumably all of the book is encouraging you to actually act in the world, which makes me think about magic. Spirituality can so often be taken as a way of self-development. All very valid, way of finding union with the divine, of developing the self, of deepening relationships, and so on. And often that can be characterized as what you might call mysticism.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about Druidry, I think, is it's both mystical in that sense, helping us to achieve union with, all being and so on. But it's also magical. It's also a magical path. Mm-hmm. And then if you say, well, what do you mean by magic? Well, it's about acting in the world. It's about accepting the fact that we're here, the fact that we can influence things and people and the earth is a responsibility that we need to accept, because we do it whether we like it or not. And how can we do this with consciousness and with a deep sense of sort of ethical guidance and so on? So am I right in saying your book is all about sacred action?
Yeah. And I think that you're really, really getting to the heart of part of what I'm really trying to argue in this book is, we have lots of books that give you the mystical pieces of Druidry, right? They give you the, what to do, how to meditate, but there's a real benefit, and it's like an entire different layer that you get. So I'll give an example here. Maybe like 10 years ago, I started learning how to worm compost. Okay. And vermicompost is the term. So, you can do this anywhere in the world. I've actually taught, sometimes I teach sustainability classes, and, I've obviously done community organizing and stuff. You can literally get like a 3-gallon bucket instead of 2, and then create a worm composter. It could literally sit in a dorm room. So it's a really awesome practice. And so, I'm doing my meditations, I'm doing my rituals and all of those things. And I'm like, I'm going to try this worm composting thing. And this is when I lived in an apartment. And, I start doing the worm composting, and about 6 months after you start your worm composter, you can actually, harvest the compost and then restart the whole thing, put the worms back in and everything. And it's quite a process to do this. And I remember pulling this compost out, and I realized that I had missed things. Like, I put a banana peel in there, and there's a little plastic film over the label. So the worms ate everything but the plastic film.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to pull this out, and I'm like, my goodness, I didn't even realize all this plastic was in here. So now what am I going to do with it? So now I make eco bricks. That's a different thing. That's also in the book. But it struck me that this gave me a really deep meditation on what is this plastic that I'm using? How am I doing it? And it actually enhanced my understanding of my own relationship to the world. And it was just this really, I know it sounds kind of crazy to sit with this worm composter, but have this fundamental sort of shift in my awareness, but it led to all sorts of interesting spiritual insights. So what I'm trying to say is that the sacred actions, it's kind of like it's as above, so below, as within, so without, we gain experiences through our mystical experiences, but we can also gain incredible experiences through these kinds of daily sacred actions, and they can feed each other and they can build in really powerful ways. And then I think the more that we're able to do that, the more we're able to really align with the most basic understanding of Druidry, which is that, we and nature are not separate. We're together. We're part of this. And that's just such a powerful thing. So now I have a responsibility, because I've got this piece of plastic that I didn't even know was there, that I didn't even know I consumed. So now I can stick it in an eco brick, and I can use it for a natural building project, or I can donate it to a zoo or a community that's going to use it for good rather than it end up in the ocean. And now I feel great, and I've really thought about what that cycle is, and I've tied back to that Druid idea. So there's just so much to it. It's just really fascinating.
That's great. That's great, Donna. I'm so glad you've written this book, Sacred Actions. And we're going to stock it in the Obod bookstore, definitely, and encourage people to buy it and to read it and to engage with it and really work with it. There's a lovely story. I don't know. I'm sure you know it. You know the one of the girl with the starfish. An old man goes down to the sea, and he sees, a little girl throwing the starfishes into the water, and he says, "What are you doing?" And she says, "Well, they get washed up on the beach, and if the tide doesn't come back in high enough, they die. So I'm throwing them back in to save them." And he looks along the beach, and he sees thousands of them. He says, "Well, you can't possibly save all these. They can't make any difference." And she just looks at him and says, "Well, it sure makes a difference to this one," and then throws it in. And when I read that story, that kind of resolved a kind of despair I had been suffering from for some time, was that there was nothing I could do. There was nothing I could do. And I was feeling overwhelmed by it. And I read that story, and it just lifted it. In a way, it's interesting from a Druidic point of view. It's an example of the power of story, isn't it? Mm-hmm. The power of story. I read that story, and I realized, it certainly made a difference to that one. And so, and it's a similar idea with your idea of refuges as well. I think that's fantastic. Yeah.
Well, and I also think too, there's a lot of us these days. I don't know. I think the last time we talked, maybe 30,000 OBOD Druids. AODA's got about...
I think there are 26,000 members of OBOD.
I don't know how many ADF members we have. I don't know all of the Druid orders. We've got about 1,500 now in AODA.
Yeah.
So if you think about that, those are not small numbers of people. I was telling this to AODA members. I'm like, if one of the things we do is plant the tree and make 3 lifestyle changes. If you do the math, now we've got 1,500 more trees, and most people plant more than one. If we plant 2 trees, that's 3,000 more trees.
Yeah, exactly.
I do think we always have to think about the power of, if each of us just do something, there's a power of collective action. And if we can bring that together and share, suddenly it doesn't look like such a small thing.
Yeah.
And that's important too. And I think that's one of the benefits of Druid orders, and, getting involved in some kind of Druid order or some kind of other organization that, ties to a spiritual path.
And we all need encouragement, and we all need, we all need guidance, and we need people to say, hey, why don't you do this, and try this, and we might half know it already, we might fully know it already, but need to be reminded about it. But this is all, needed. So thank you so much. Thank you for telling us about your book, Donna, and I hope it goes really well, and good luck with it.
Thank you so much.
The trees, they grow high, and the leaves, they grow so green. Many is the time my true love I have seen. It's a cold winter's night, the time must bide alone, for he's young and he's daily growing. Father, my father, you've done me much wrong. You've married me to a boy who is too young. I'm Christ 7 and he's but 14, for he's young and he's daily growing. The trees, they grow high, and the leaves, they grow so green. Many the time my true love I have seen. It's a cold winter's night that I must bide alone, for he's young and he's daily growing. Daughter, my daughter, to college she will go. Then perhaps in time he'll do for you. I'll buy him fine ribbons to tie about his waist, to let them all know that he is married. The trees, they grow high, and the leaves, they grow so green. Many is the time my true love I have seen. It's a cold winter's night that I must bide alone, for he's young and he's daily growing. Early in the morning, at the dawning of the day, they went into the woods to sport and play. And what they did there, well, she would never say, but she complained no more of his growing. At the age of 15 he was a married man. At the age of 16 she brought to him a son. At the age of 18 the grass grew over him, and that put an end to his growing. The trees, they grow high, and the leaves, they grow so green. Many is the time my true love I have seen. It's a cold winter's night that I must bide alone, for he's young and he's daily growing. The trees, they grow high, and the leaves, they grow so green. The day is past and gone, my love, that you and I have seen. It's a cold winter's night, now I must bide alone. Oh, but your bonny lad's growing. He's young and he's daily growing. are green. Many is the time my true love I have seen. It's a cold winter's night that I must fight alone, for he's young and he's daily growing. He's young and he's daily growing. He's young and he's daily growing.
Times long past lived a man of green, and his footsteps brought life wherever he'd been. In the deepest wildwood was the place he was seen, and the people did love and protect him. And they saw his face change with the turn of the wheel of the seasons. They heard his voice sing, I'm the horn god, I'm the face in the trees, I'm the breath of the wind that rustles the leaves. I'm the green man in the wildwood I roam, Donnas, I'm Pan and I'm Hearn. I shall be as the dark Holly King. Darkness and cold in my cloak I will bring, but on winter's nights to me you will sing, till the air around me starts changing. And on the noon of the solstice I'll give up my crown to the light and the mighty, O King. I'm the horn god, I'm the face in the trees, I'm the breath of the wind that rustles the leaves. I'm the green man in the wildwood I roam, Donnas, I'm Pan and I'm Hearn. Summer long I will rule just and fair, bring your crops to fruit with the light that I share, with fire and water from earth into air. Oh, but the wheel it keeps steadily turning, and on the noon of the solstice I'll give up my crown to the cold and the dark Holly King. I'm the horn god, I'm the face in the trees, I'm the breath of the wind that rustles the leaves. I'm the green man in the wildwood I roam, Donnas, I'm Pan and I'm Hearn. Now modern times and the summer is here, the winter has gone and the air it is clear. On a fine day I walk through a wood I live near, oh, and a battle I spy through a clearing. Two giants of leaves, one light and one dark, even now the wheel it is turning. I'm the horn god, I'm the face in the trees, I'm the breath of the wind that rustles the leaves. I'm the green man in the wildwood I roam, Donnas, I'm Pan and I'm Hearn. Nunna sein pan and ein hern. 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 I'm the horn god, I'm the face in the trees, I'm the breath of the wind that rustles the leaves. I'm the green man in the wildwood I roam, Nunna sein pan and ein hern.
Give me weeds with wild abandon, violets dancing on the lawn, clovers make good company for dandelions dewy with the dawn. Let forsythia grow shameless, leave the clippers in the shed, take the brambles with the roses, go where Mother Earth has led. For weeds are never lonely if you'll only let them be. Wildflowers come a-calling when you let the green grow free.
A fascinating discussion, and I can thoroughly recommend Donna's new book, a welcome addition to any Druid library. I have seen, however, that the book is out on the 28th of June, but you can pre-order it right now. After the talky bit, you heard another song from the new album by Ruby Moon, this one called The Trees They Grow High. That was followed by my salute to the solstice season, taken from my album Spirit of Albion, and you heard Noon of the Solstice, and then you heard a poem from Colleen Scully called Summer Weeds that really captures this time of the summer solstice for me perfectly. Thank you for sending that in, Colleen. Well, this music means we're approaching the end of the show, but you know what I'm going to say next? Before I go, let's have the results of last month's competition. The prize was a signed copy of Liv Talk's Banana poetry book, and the question I asked was, what is the name of the Japanese poetry style Liv used for her Haiflu project? Well, the answer is haiku, and the first name drawn from the hat is Scott McDougall from Australia. Congratulations, Scott. That book will be with you as soon as possible. The prize this month is a copy of the new CD from Ruby Moon, 2 songs of which you have heard during the show. And the question I'd like you to answer is, the opening song Ruby Moon played, Hush Hush, Time to Be Sleeping, is a famous song from which country? The opening song, Hush Hush, Time to Be Sleeping, is a famous song from which country? Email your answer along with your full postal address to podcast@druidry.org, and one of you will win that amazing CD. Now, if you're listening to this early and before the 19th of June, you are invited to join us on the Orders Facebook page and YouTube channel for a day of free streamed events. From 10 a.m. UK time, there will be 3 presentations, one from John Matthews, another from Penny Billington, and then from Professor Ronald Hutton. Then in the afternoon, there will be a streamed solstice ritual hosted by the Sylvan Grove. And then in the evening, an Eisteddfod with performances from Barry Patterson, Liv Talk, Poplar Jake, Arthur ZZ Birmingham, myself, and Spiral Dance. So do join us for what I am sure will be a fabulous day. But something other than that is happening as well, wonderful this weekend. And whether you're celebrating the sun at his zenith here in the Northern Hemisphere or welcoming back the light of the winter solstice down under, may the light of our star bring you wonder and joy. And until next month, my friends, I wish you all peace and blessed be. Goodbye.